Okay, now Mr. Bradford needs a little of the Chinese
rocket fuel.
herbal elixir. And hold on, we're gonna make this.
I can tell the difference between these two horns. Did you? I bought this about 3 months after John died, man. John died in February, March, April, May, about 3 months. Well, periodically, I get people from all over the place, man, emailing me about John, you know. And asking questions, of course, that I can't answer now. Ah, yes. Let's see.
Say when.
That's good. That's good. We don't want to go to the moon now. We're just going. This is good stuff.
Would you like some?
No thanks.
Another hit?
No, that's good.
No thanks.
If Francis doesn't like that, you see, he may find out later on in his life, his dad will tell him, actually, we found you in a supermarket on Guam. We never wanted to tell you. I'm not Chinese. I don't know if you ever saw the band Ray Charles from Leroy Cooper, the guy they called the Hog, the big 300-pound baritone saxophone player.
Wow.
So when he got ready to go into the military, and you needed a birth certificate and everything, when he found out he was adopted. You know?
How do you react?
Oh, he said, it didn't mean anything. He said, it was just, I said, okay. Right, you know? It's like somebody saying that you've been looking at it as long as you can remember you could see people, and that was your mom and dad. He said, well, that's interesting, you know?
Okay, do you want a chair or something? It's gonna be 30 minutes.
30 minutes. I hope you got some tantalizing questions here for me to go 30 minutes. But I have my backup routine, you know.
I was gonna say, I've never known you to have trouble talking.
No, I don't have trouble talking.
I can move that, but you remember that thing. If you sit on it, you can't get up.
Yeah, I'm gonna just stay right here.
Yeah?
Just stay.
For 30 minutes?
Well, I can stay.
Well, I was hit by a car, so fuck that shit. Yeah.
Now, see, if you, in your solo section, if you get to a point where you start talking about getting hit by a car, I'll go like this.
Okay.
Okay, we're ready?
Just a second. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, so we thought that we would start each one of us by talking about how we came to be in Purple Gums.
Ah, how we came to be in Purple Gums.
Yeah.
Well, of course, my entry into the trio, if you will, I think was via William Roper, having played with him on some other occasions, and then being invited to come into the situation as we now know it. It's not clear now in my memory exactly the day and time, or how many times we had played together before we made the first CD. Maybe you can prompt me on that, and I could.
I don't recall either at the moment.
Yeah, it's a little muddy. But I can say this: the idea of the three of us, I just found it really exciting. What we do, we never have sit down and really charted out what we do. I think this has all been a sort of a kind of gut level, thing for what we wanted to do. We never set up any rules that I can remember, other than just trying to be creative, which is which has always been something I was interested in as a performer. And I find that in this setting, we certainly have an opportunity to be creative. That's what keeps us rolling along. I'm trying to actually remember now what the first engagement where we played together.
Well, actually, in terms of history, you started because you came to Oakland to play. You played in a concert in Oakland.
Me and who?
I'm trying to remember whether it was you. I think you were playing. There was a concert of a guy named. You were there with Benny Maupin and.
Kumari.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow! Now I come back.
And then I was kind of hosting the concert.
Oh yeah.
And that's because I was the director of the space. And then you said that we should do something together.
Oh yes.
Does that come back to you?
Yeah, I do now. I do remember approaching you saying, "Man, we should do something." And, ordinarily you'd think that there are situations where people say, "Well, I'll call you," and of course they have no intention of calling you. But when I said that, I remember very clearly now, thinking that, hey, we should do something because we have of a mind to get on a track that I'm very interested in. Though I had not tried to organize such a band here in Los Angeles, I had tried several times to get 2 or 3 people to play with me under the conditions that we play who were not interested in doing it. I'm thinking of one person now who will remain unnamed, who said, well, if you don't have anything but just start off and start playing like that, he said, it's just, it can't be very much. When I said to him something very close to that, well, in some people's hands, it might not be much. But I'm thinking it would be in ours, because we had a common, interest in a certain kind of music, which obviously had, resonated other musics. Like our ad says sometimes, a little ragtime, a little blues, little jazz, whatever. I like all of those, And we every time we play, I think at some point in the course of the evening, we get on really uncharted territory. And we play things which I really love, looking back at it, that I've never played before and will never play again. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, because I remember you saying that the idea, because you actually had the concept at that point, because you said something like, well, we'll just play and we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, well, see, I had thought about such a band, and I had tried to get something like that happening. I didn't propose to people, here's what we'd like to do. But I've tried to play situations with people where we would try to do what we do. And they didn't like it. I'm thinking of somebody in particular now, wonderful player, but did not want to go outside a piece where you began with a thematic statement, you improvised, and then you went back to that. We see that's no disrespect, that's really an old approach, to say and a wonderful one at that, to start with a theme and then be guided in the improvisation either by the chords or the melody or none of those, and return to the theme. Where we start, we don't know where we're going to start, but we all know the name of the game. That's what I like about it. I know that there is such a thing as theme and variation, but I sometimes I just want to start with variation, and to say that to people sometimes they right away dismiss it, and say, I like to play a cornet solo, but not have a cornet. Well, then they would say, okay, get this guy out of here, or call 911,
So what attracted you? I mean, what kind of worked in your mind to kind of come up with that idea?
I don't know, man. It's been a long time now, But I suppose if we go back, it would be Ornette Coleman that introduced me to the concept of not following, schematic chord system. Where when I when I met this guy that I think of, as a real leader in that so-called new music of the late 50s and early 60s, I was a pretty good bebop trumpet player. I knew how to play at that point, Donald Lee, and all the things you are, and played, a competent bebopper. But I was playing, stuff that I learned on record and stuff that I played over and over and over like I practiced. And I thought I was doing pretty good at it. But conceptually, this idea that Coleman had was a new door to me. To begin an improvisation where you didn't refer to this chord pattern of the song that you played. In fact, you have written a song that didn't even have a chord pattern because harmonically it would be too unwieldy to try to use in repetition over and over. And I lit up like the morning sun on the concept of that. And when I played with him, I don't remember any occasion where we did not have theme, improvisation, and back to theme. Now, there may be some people who are of a different opinion about that, but I go all the way back to this guy to the 50s. And we always have a theme, an area of improvisation, and back to the theme. That's the way it went. Except that we did not follow, in the period after that, the harmonic framework. And maybe there were a couple of times when he and I practiced together sometimes where we just sit down and we might be playing some exercises that he had written, just trying to work up something that he was, and we'd play through it, and then we just play, and we go back to these things that he wrote. But they were more like etudes, where actually what he was doing the groundwork then for some larger works that he was working on, and he was trying to get the feel for how these notes would work, like on a brass instrument or on a saxophone. And they were not intended to be played as tunes, because most of the time that I played with him was mostly in clubs, some concerts, but mostly in clubs. And it is from that point, you see, where I thought somewhere along the line there, I think I'd like to play with people who have the same experience that I have. Not the same persuasion, but know how to play that, right? To the extent that that's how that works, but who would want to do something out there that was totally spontaneous, and which meant that you had to listen to each other even more, with more precision, if you will. You couldn't shift into whatever that is on the car now, where you put it in cruise. There's no cruise, because if you went into cruise, man, you're going to lose it, I don't know when that first occurred to me. That might have been something that I was pursuing, I guess, in the middle 70s, late 70s, at this little place I had in Pasadena called the Little Bighorn. I had a little storefront there, right next door to a comedy house called the Ice House that's still there. And it was kind of a place where I let other people come in sometimes and they could have the space and just give me a piece of the door to help pay the rent there. But a couple of times there I had tried, more than a couple, where it'd be just me and another horn player and we just have some bells and toys and all. But it never got beyond somebody wanting to play a particular tune and improvisation and go back to the tune. Where, and I don't need to say this to you, and I said, we don't know what we're going to do up to the last millisecond. See, I like that a lot. That may be because I'm getting old and I don't have a lot of milliseconds left, but I like the concept, and I give it 100%, We obviously have nights where we're really flying, and then nights where we're not flying. But see, that'd be true in a bebop band, Some nights you're flying, some nights you're not. But I think the three personalities in this group are really important. Just sort of our experience, our training, what we like, what's the word for it? Sensibility, that I really think we feed off. And I like it a lot.
The next question we have has to do with, well, that actually covered the first two questions, right?
Yeah.
But the third question has to do with how do you reconcile doing different kinds of disc music, but also you do other music?
You're talking about one does this or me?
You.
Well.
Because where do you kind of locate this in your own musical identity?
I don't spend a lot of time now thinking about identity. Perhaps I did, when I was in my 30s, or when the stakes were higher.
Mm-hmm.
You see, at this point in my life now, I spend very little time thinking about what people think,
Mm-hmm.
or what am I going to get out of this,
Mm-hmm.
But mostly now when I do things, if I understand the question now, I was the director of the jazz band at Pomona College for about 25 years, up until about 6 or 7 years ago, when it got to a point where I physically didn't feel like doing it anymore. And of course, in that context, I relied upon stuff that I had learned playing traditional jazz. But that band was a good band some years and some years not so good. And the students that came in, we got a lot of talent there sometimes. But very often, and most often, the students were not music majors. They're just people who'd been going to band camp every year since they were, in the 8th grade, and they played very well. And we played in some professional level and semi-professional level charts, some good stuff. But anytime I would try to move them, you see, into an area where not trying to do what we're doing, but just a little freer, I got a lot of resistance. But I know how to do that. I know how to run a band that's going to play Count Basie charts. I know that tradition. I know the tradition of a band that would play something like what Mingus plays, somebody that I really love, but still was working in a framework different than ours. And I know how to do that. But I found no personal pleasure in doing that. That was what I did every day. I taught the jazz history class, which I still do, and I enjoyed that. But I enjoyed it to the extent that I was giving the students an opportunity to have a musical experience while they were in college, and it was a decent band. But I don't spend any time now thinking about learning, let's say, whom I love dearly. I don't sit around and try to learn all the Wayne Shorter tunes, and all the Horace Silver tunes, and all the Thelonious Monk tunes. So you could spend your whole career trying to get a command of Thelonious Monk's music. And I know, half a dozen Monk tunes, some of the hard ones. But it's hard to get up in front of a class and talk about that stuff with authority if you haven't done it. If you just said, well, that's on the page, you can go and look that up. I know how to play around midnight. I know the chords at the piano. And every now and then I say, let's see, where does this go? Because I haven't played this in 30 years, but yeah, I remember this. But in terms of identity, now, I like to think of myself as what we do now. I'm an improviser, in a music setting that I really love and really am happy doing. But I grew up, you see, I was in high school, you see, in the 50s, when this is the tail end of the bebop thing. It was really big. I grew up listening to Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk and Dizzy Gillespie, transcribing the solos from those 78 recordings, with just trying to figure out what these guys were playing. Because there were no books. Mm-hmm. There were no book. There wasn't a decent book on the market when I was in high school about the harmony of jazz, or the beboppers, harmonic innovation and all that stuff. You had to get all that, you put the record on and put a little rock on it to slow it down and try to figure out what it was. But there were people in the community, see, who were retired professionals who were, 60, 65 years old, who had played professionally, that I knew what was happening, but there was no real schooling as such, other than the energy that you put into it trying to learn what this was about. So there were a lot of my friends who grew up in that period who wanted to be in music, but they didn't particularly like bebop. They wanted to be kind of like the big R&B stars, like Louis Jordan, who was a terrific R&B saxophone player and singer and composer. And I can remember having discussions with guys who was, don't you want to be famous? And yeah, I guess I might have wanted to be famous or something, but that wasn't what motivated me, I loved the music that I heard. See, the boppers for me were like a breath of fresh air, not only the music, but socially. Mm-hmm. So from the time I was in the first year in high school all the way out into college, I was into the beboppers. And the so-called new music that people wanted to call it during the period, Ornette Coleman opened the door to that for me. It was like anything else. You open the door to people, you see people will come into what you have done and do things that you never imagined. You see, I don't think Ornette Coleman ever had any idea that there was going to be an Anthony Braxton. You see? But you didn't say, you opened the door to this, man. I decided I'm going to take that thing and run with it. but I'm going this way, you know. And so I welcome the opportunity now just to get to play, you know, do what we do. I don't know when the last time I've had a job playing where I actually played standards. Sometimes with my band, when we call it motet, we may play a 12-bar blues. But other than that, I'm playing original tunes, you know. And I have people with me in that group that we work periodically called motet, who are basically more conventional players. But my music forces them into a place where they have to call on something else, you see. And that's been good too, though we don't get a lot of work. But I'm not complaining. I play our record sometimes for my class there in the history of jazz, and people say, well, they ask these really strange questions about, we can't tell whether you're improvising or it's written. That's perfect, right? That's good. And I've had people say to me about my motet, we can't tell whether the tune stops and the improvisation starts. I said, that's wonderful. Or some people say, you know what, all I can do is laugh when you're playing. That's good too. You know, I'll take that. So I hope you're getting something out of this, and our listeners are too.
Well, especially at that last part you were just talking about, you play our record in class, and so you're kind of, people hear the history of jazz. You see, you're putting it in the history of jazz.
Yes, I certainly am. You see, of course, and now you open the door to another question. If people say, well, how do we know that's not classical music? I said, you got a real problem here if you grew up in America. Even if you've never been to a classical concert, if you just go to movies and you listen to the radio and television, you know what classical music is. So if I put on here like a Beethoven string quartet, then I put on the concerto for orchestra. You might not know anything about that, but that's that music where we go and they all have long hair and there's a lot of them up there. And so there's no way you could say what we play is classical music. And then it's not straight up and down jazz, but it's closer to jazz than it is anything else, in my mind. You see, I find that sometimes we'll be playing and we both are thinking about some ragtime piece. Well, we know what that is, but I'm coming from the position, if you will, and just in terms of articulation, as a jazz player. I pick the horn up, sometimes I do it in the class. I pick the horn up and I go, and I say, that's from the Hindemith Trumpet Concerto. And you're supposed to say, oh no, Mr. Bradford, I don't think so. You're kind of mixed up. You must be thinking about Chester Hindemith, right? So the idea is, I don't know what your answer would be to this, but just based on articulation, you're supposed to know that I was at some point a jazz player, And of course, I don't have any problem. People say to me, well, that isn't jazz. It's okay. But it's our music. That's what I like. As my mother said to me once when I was showing her some stuff that I had written, she said, well, if you can get people to sit down for an hour and listen to the music that you wrote, and they don't get up and leave, she said, you're doing fine. Right? Which I thought was a good yardstick. You're sitting there and you're in control of, you wrote this music, and they're sitting there listening. And they didn't leave. She said, as she would have said, perhaps both from Mississippi, you're picking tall cotton, son.
I was wondering, maybe you could, since you talked about how you kind of got into this after you were playing with rope or something, maybe you could just talk about, your kind of relationship musically.
Well, one thing that makes this a little easier, of course, we live near each other here, like 5 minutes away from, and we run into each other sometimes in the streets, but I can remember, tell me if I'm wrong, I can remember William showing up at some of my motet concerts. Yeah, going back a long way. And I think him trying to see if on some level we both could find a common ground doing something that we like to play. Because often William will say, well, you know, I'm classically trained and I do this and I will know all of that and you can use all of that. You know, I think the last time we were out, William said to the audience that I do this and I do the other, and I put it in to say, but William's not telling us all that. He loves what we do because we don't make a lot of money. Everybody knows that. But we're here for love, you know, because we love to perform. And I wouldn't change it, you know. It's not like you could say to William, now you play the tuba and you classically train a lot, but you don't know, let's see now, Ask Me Now by Thelonious Monk. He said, well, no, I don't. You know, but if you want to play it, let's do it. You know, but we play it like we play, you see. We might only play 2 bars out of Ask Me Now, you know. Da-da-dee-do-da-dee. And William would go boom, pa, boom. See, then we're off and running. That's what we like about it, you see. Because you see, I mean, I'm just thinking of things that go through my mind sometimes when we're playing. When I think of somebody like Thelonious Monk, I'm reading a book written by a guy who's a faculty member at SC now. I read the book once, but I rushed through it and I'm going back again. It's really well written about Monk. When I think about Thelonious Monk, I hear things, nothing in particular, but I hear his slant, you know. And that's all you need right there. Me anyway. That's enough ammunition there to shoot down a lot of people, you know. And when I think of Miles Davis, it's another place in my head, you know, especially as it relates to the trumpet. Just the articulation, which I just found fascinating. After all these great trumpet players, you know, Louis Armstrong and Roy Eldridge, Buck Clayton, then Dizzy, then Miles Davis comes in and says, well, what about this? You think, especially for brass players, you think, God, man, where did he get that sound? We used to say when I was in high school, maybe if we ever get the money, we'll be able to buy a Martin trumpet like Miles had and get this sound. And the band teacher says, no, son, you can't buy that. Right? They don't make a horn that'll give you this sound like Miles Davis. Well, all of that I see is in my storage bank, you see. And you have stuff in your storage bank, you see. I'm sure if somebody says, well, you know, Coleman Hawkins on the saxophone. Maybe you never copied anything on Coleman Hawkins, but you know what that is. Somebody says Lester. Oh, yeah. Oh, I know what that is. And I know what these things are, you know. It's, and I think that's what, you know, that's what gives us the momentum that we can, you know, bring to what we do. Besides our wonderful little speeches, you know, I like those too. You see, there's a definite connection in my mind, though I can't give you perfect examples of it, but there's a connection in jazz, let's say, and in R&B too, directly to Black people's speech patterns. But that's hard to codify. You know, you say to students, I do it in my class sometimes, I say, well, now, why would anybody want to say, what up, dude? And I said, what's wrong with that? And I'm addressing an Asian student. Said, what? She said, we left out the verb. I said, well, what do you think that means? He doesn't know that you need a verb there? I said, well, what if I came up to you now and said, what is up? You'd go, where are you from? You're not from around here, are you? That's what you'd say. So you see, that's about the percussive nature of Black people's speech, which is in the music. But it's hard to impart that, see, because it doesn't fit into anything you can document in a way other than a lot of recordings, which I haven't done. But it's certainly there, and in jazz music too. It's like that famous lick of Dizzy Gillespie that half my life I was trying to learn how to play that figure that he plays. It's a Gillespie kind of cliche now where he goes, and he's using his forked fingering, only way you make it work. And for years I was trying to get that together. One day I said, I'm going to lock myself in the room until I can get it, you know. And I still can't play it like Gillespie did because he put a lot of hours in on it, but that's his trademark in it. Well, see, that's a part of how his speech, you know. It's like with Charlie Parker, you know. Some of that stuff is directly out of the South, Southwest, and Black people's speech patterns, you know. I'm going into my jazz history class now, which we're not supposed to be doing here.
Oh, that's great.
But it's okay. But all these things are at work, you see, when we're playing. We're drawing up on three people's, you know, experiences and sensibility, You know, what you like. And I like the idea sometimes where one of us wants to go one place and the other one doesn't want to go. And so we just figure out how we're going to make it work. And I can't remember if we've ever had an exchange after the gig about, well, I thought you should have stayed around A flat right there. I don't ever remember having a conversation like that. If you did, I was asleep when you did it. You know, we do our thing and we learn from what we play, but we go on to the next opportunity.
We good?
We good.
Okay. Wonderful.
Thank you.
I actually had one last thing.
Keep going.
Yeah.
So, talk about Purple Gums. The name, just the name, and what that means to you.
Well, now, of course.
How you kind of riff on that.
Well, you know, see, when I growing up in the South, you could hear white people say, "Don't touch such and such. It's poison as a blue-gummed." Bad word there, N-word, that people find offensive, and I'm not going to use it now because I know the people out there. I don't have any problem with that word, but it takes too long to explain it, you see. So when I have an article from a newspaper for my class where somebody's writing it over and keep using the N-word, I said, there's some of you out there who are really horrified by this, and I said, I am not, but if it bothers you that much, we'll try to figure out how not to use it. But white people would say, such and such is poison as a blue gum, and they said blue rather than purple. Well, the first time we did that on that recording, I don't know if we had ever done that on a gig where William talked about it. But I knew what that was about. What people often say to me, well, what does gingivitis have to do with the record? I said, well, now you ought to buy the record, you know, and read the liner notes, and I'll talk to you about it. But it's just, I thought it was perfect, excuse me, as a vehicle, if you will, to confront an issue, you see, that was beyond it being just about people of dark skin whose gum tissue is appropriately dark also. You're not going to see any black people now, I'm talking about black, with pink gums like Caucasians. Mother Nature doesn't work like that. So people who are really black, their gums are bluish purple, dark, as much as their skin. And so I often talk about this in my class when I put the record out, and they want to know what purple gums is. I said, well, maybe you don't know any black people. You've never been up close to any black people where you could see anything other than their teeth. And you don't realize that the darker you are, the more purple bluish is the gum tissue. And I thought it was a brilliant stroke. It's like when I had occasion not too long ago in Venice, here, our Venice, where they were doing a tribute to two poets. Viggo Mortensen, who was just in the film that got an Oscar. He's a poet, you know, and so he's part of this thing called Beyond Baroque. And they were also honoring a black poet on the same occasion, Will Alexander. And so I'm trying to remember now how this worked out. We got ready to, they had, you know how sometimes in the show business people will have you booked to come in and play on an affair like that. And they said, okay, Mr. Bradford, we want you to come up and play, and you and the bass player play a duet. And I had played over there Beyond Baroque once before. But anyhow, when the deal went down, as we say, the woman was in charge, Dwight Tribble showed up, and she said, oh, well, the three of you go up. And she just took the liberty to say, well, I'm just going to orchestrate this, and I'm not going to talk to you about whatever it was. So she said, well, Dwight Tribble's coming up, and it'll be a trio with you and the bass and Dwight Tribble. No discussion or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so it's too late to talk about it. I was going to really ream her about just throwing that at us like that. But we got up there, and I said, what are we going to do? And so Dwight Tribble said, let's do Battle Hymn of the Republic. Brilliant call. This was about a couple of months ago. I forget what was happening, but there was some stuff on the headlines about where we are in America. Mm-hmm. And so he said, just lead me into the key of C, man. And so I don't remember now, but I played something like you do in the military. And then wound up where it went da-da, da-dee, da-doo, da-doom, da-dum. Mm-hmm. And the drummer from the Doors was in the audience. He jumps up on the stage there with us. I don't know, somebody told me who he was, not that important, but I'm just thinking about the call for the tune. You see, and so there were people there who, in fact, when we got off stage, one guy said to me, he came up to me in tears, this is a white guy, he said, in the beauty of the lily, Christ was born across the sea. And that's what we had been playing. That's what I did to get us into the song. He was in tears. I thought, I called right the next day. I said, man, that was a hell of a call you made. Because then we took it out too. As Dwight sang the melody, and I came in with some stuff that, a lot of bugle calls to go with, like the Civil War or something, you know? And so this thing, when William decided to do this thing and to call it Purple Horns, he brought something out that had to be discussed sooner or later, but by people who were unwilling. It's like people will ask you questions. I have students who said, I've never known any black kids growing up. And so I said, well, what would happen if you were in an elevator now? You know, and there were 10 black Africans on the elevator with you, all speaking their native language. And there's just you, one white guy, and 10 of these Africans, and you're going up about 30 floors. What would you do? Shrink? You know, so there you are. You know, I saw an interview on television the other night with a guy from U2, Bono. He said he never knew anybody black closely until he met Jimi Hendrix all his life. But I think he's Irish. But just think about that, you see. And then if you'd say, well, you know, black people don't do this or they don't like that, and you don't know anything about these people who are with you here on the planet for the last 400 years. We've just brought something out. Now, you see, it's like the N-word. If we had long enough here now to talk about it, we could see where some people, what is the horror of it? And I say to my class at Pomona sometimes, you see, if we wanted to buffoon some black people at Halloween, we could come out with a placard with saying, and I'm saying this mostly white kids, you could buffoon black people, couldn't you? You won't say it now, but you could, whatever it is you see about them. And you could buffoon the Asians in the class, and the Hispanics too. And I said, but now, how would black people buffoon Anglos? What would we do on our poster? And so you see how the majority scenario has kept that in such a way that, what would we do if we want to put a big placard up now at Halloween and make fun of white people? What would we do? Make them whiter? Or make their hair longer? Or make them all blonde? I said, you could think about this for a long time. Maybe you would come up with something. But as we speak, you can't think of any way to black people. I'm saying to black people, how would you buffoon white people at Halloween? What would you do? In fact, I've said, would you put a picture up there of Nixon? Nobody would get it, would they? You see, so what I'm after here is that William opened the door to something to which I don't know if I would have done it on a recording of mine at that point, but that takes a lot of courage in the first place. And then you invite people who are who have the curiosity, and I would like to say the empathy and intellectual maturity to say, well, I'd like to know more what this is about, so I can find out how I took the position that I have taken on information that I got that was still under the control, you see, of the majority group. You know, I didn't intend for this to go this far, but maybe this is what you're after here.
That was great.
Yeah.